You have Epstein fronting for a broader network. And so keeping the focus on Epstein, I mean, it's important, obviously, to understand what he was doing, but we have to understand, too, and what I've endeavored to show is that he was fronting for a larger group that still very much have their claws over the U.S. government. And obviously the future of the U.S. and much more.
Most people think they're watching separate events. Economic crisis here, tech monopolies there, and political scandal over there. But investigative journalist Whitney Webb sees something else. She sees one system, all converging, right now. Stock market crashes, banking collapses, surveillance rollouts, and digital currency launches. These look like disconnected problems and random chaos in a complicated world, but they're not.
You know, regardless of who wins, you know, ultimately a lot of the same people are going to get what they want, because at the end of the day, so much of the stuff that the American people are tired of are really bipartisan agendas, right? And, you know, regardless of who's in office, you know, when there's a crisis, the same people tend to be called upon to...
According to Whitney Webb, we're watching a controlled demolition, and most people won't be aware until it's too late. Have you noticed that crises never come alone? They cluster and compound. For instance, a financial meltdown plus a pandemic includes civil unrest and then a war all at once. Why?
Yeah, so in the case of any sort of controlled demolition, I don't think they want it to happen until they're ready for it to happen. And so, you know, they're going to wait for certain metrics to be met before it kicks off.
It's an orchestration. Webb calls it controlled demolition. Crisis engineered to arrive when the infrastructure for the solution is already in place.
Reset, where essentially before there was a financial crisis related to COVID, in late 2019, BlackRock created this plan that pitched to the central bankers at the Jackson Hole meeting in 2019 about going direct. And basically the idea was, during the next crisis, let's QE again, but instead of giving the QE money to public entities, let's give it straight to the private banks.
BlackRock pitched the solution to central bankers in August 2019. COVID hit in early 2020. The repo market was already collapsing in September 2019. The crisis was coming, the solution was ready. And guess what? Who benefited?
And that's essentially what happened. And one of the people that received those funds, those emergency funds that were meant for Main Street, was BlackRock, and they used it to buy shares in their own ETFs instead of bailing out the people whose whose businesses were forced to close as part of government.
BlackRock, the same company that designed a bailout. They used emergency funds meant for struggling businesses to buy their own assets. The biggest wealth transfer in history, and it wasn't an accident.
Different parties and all of these oligarchs, at the end of the day, do they frame the reasoning for why they want these policies differently? They agree about more biometric surveillance, they agree about digital ID, and they ultimately agree about programmable surveillable currency, whether it's a CBDC or a private bank digital currency.
Webb's core thesis isn't complicated. There are three forces merging into one control system: power, technology, and finance. And it's almost complete. Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. Elon Musk or Bill Gates, it doesn't matter. They all want the same thing: biometric surveillance. Your face, your iris, your fingerprint, tracked everywhere. For digital ID, if there is no internet access, no transactions, no participation in society. And for programmable money, they decide what you can buy, where, when, and if your money expires.
Eric Schmidt and Peter Thiel sit on the steering committee of the Bilderberg Conference, which is kind of notorious for being a closed-door meeting of prominent, globalists in the corporate world and in the public sector,
Eric Schmidt, Democrat donor. Peter Thiel, Republican donor. Both sit on the Bilderberg steering committee together, making decisions in secret, while you fight about which team to vote for.
The co-founders, which include Peter Thiel and Max Levchin and others, have been pretty open that as they were creating their business, they did so in consultation with pretty much every intelligence agency that would talk to them.
PayPal, the company that dollarized the internet, was built in consultation with U.S. intelligence agencies from day one. And Thiel took that same model and built Palantir, total surveillance for the CIA. Then Wall Street. Then every police department in America. Now, if this is all connected, why doesn't anyone report it that way? Why do we get Tech billionaire invests in AI startup instead of surveillance contractor expands pre-crime infrastructure? Why do we get exciting new digital currency instead of programmable control system rolled out? Propaganda used to be illegal against Americans. Obama lifted that ban. And now the same billionaires building the surveillance state are buying the media. Larry Ellison, Oracle, a major CIA contractor, just bought CBS, Paramount, and possibly CNN. Elon Musk, on the other hand, owns SpaceX, Starlink, and a military contractor. Owns X.
Elon Musk, even though Twitter still censors, it's not like it stopped. Maybe they've gone against some censorship edicts from the EU and other places, but it's definitely not as free speech as perhaps some people think, but I think a lot of that's from very positive PR from a handful of people who claim that he's, the savior of free speech and all of that. And I think that's very different than what has actually happened. And I would argue that a lot of the reason, he bought Twitter again was to obtain user data to train AI, which if you haven't disabled it on your Twitter account, every tweet you make and everything you do on Twitter goes and feeds the Grok AI.
You're not the customer, but the product. Every engagement and scroll feeds the machine that will predict your behavior, control your perception, and shape your reality. This is why the media fragments the story. Because if they showed you the whole picture, you'd see it. A transnational network operating above elected governments. Now, let's talk about Epstein. Not the sex trafficking that everyone knows about. Let's talk about his network that Webb actually focuses on.
I guess there's a lot more I could say too, but ultimately, I think there's a lot more needs to be done in investigating Epstein's activities as it relates to finances. There's a lot of ties to various financial crises, efforts to short currencies around the world. He was a known Forex trader. He worked with a lot of currency traders and had connections to them. People like Jimmy Goldsmith, for example. And others that were referred to by the New York Times in the 90s as a cabal of, currency traders that were basically destroying whole economies. And pretty much everyone in that cabal has ties to the Rothschild banking dynasty, which Epstein in these recent files acknowledge he represents. But that's quite clear that was the case.
Epstein wasn't just a predator. He was a financial operative. He was involved in money laundering, currency manipulation, and destroying entire economies for profit. And everyone in that network is connected to the Rothschild banking dynasty.
If we don't follow these threads, as I've, been saying, away from Epstein and higher up, he was being puppeteered by people, and he was obviously of use to them. I think the narrative that Epstein was an idiot and all of this, maybe he didn't use good grammar in emails, but he was obviously sought out for his abilities in, illicit finance and, smuggling. Among other things.
Les Wexner, billionaire, Victoria's Secret, gave Epstein total power of attorney over his fortune. Why? Because the Rothschilds referred him. The same Rothschilds who financed the modern state of Israel. Who profits from wars? Who controls central banks? So what's the next crisis? Webb is clear that a U.S. debt crisis is next, and it's coming soon.
It's very likely that in the next 2 years, whoever wins in November is going to be president during an unprecedented U.S. government debt crisis. And this is, if you already see it in Trump's policy, if he's in office, this is the system he's going to propose.
Doesn't matter who the president is. The crisis is coming, and the solution is already built. The solutions are dollar-backed stablecoins. Programmable, surveillable, issued by private banks and partnered with the FBI. Your bank fails, your money's gone. But don't worry, the government will give it back. As stablecoins, you'll accept it. Because the alternative is losing everything. Crisis, reaction, and solution. It's the oldest playbook in history, and they're using it again. What Whitney Webb wants you to understand is that these aren't separate events. Epstein wasn't one bad guy, COVID wasn't random, and the next financial crisis won't be an accident. Organized crime, intelligence agencies, Silicon Valley billionaires, and central banks. They are all fused and all working together to profit from every crisis. But the system only works if you comply, if you accept digital IDs, if you use programmable money, if you hand over your freedom for the illusion of safety. So, brace up. Something huge is coming, and now you see it. The question is, what will you do about it?